Wrestling juice here, and what you are about to hear is going to shake you to your core. Because in a single Friday afternoon, 23 careers were ended without warning, without farewell, and without mercy, and the names on that list will leave you absolutely speechless. WrestleMania 42 had just wrapped up in Las Vegas. The confetti had barely been swept off the floor. The pyro smoke had not even fully cleared from the arena. And then, quietly, without any dramatic announcement or on-air tribute, the phone calls began. One by one, names started appearing on wrestling news websites. Sean Ross Sapp over at Fightful and Mike Johnson at PW Insider began confirming departures throughout the day as the talent themselves took to social media to break their own heartbreaking news. By the time everything settled, at least 23 wrestlers had been let go in what can only be described as one of the most sweeping roster purges in recent memory. This was not a small trim. This was not WWE quietly releasing a few underutilized developmental talents that barely appeared on television. This cut went through the main roster, through NXT, and deep into the developmental system, touching Raw, SmackDown, and the Performance Center all in the same afternoon. Some of the names on that list will not be familiar to the average fan. Tyra May Steele, Serena Linton, and Trill London are names that never got the chance to fully bloom on national television, but they were people with contracts, with dreams, and with careers that were wiped out in a matter of hours. And then there were the other names, the ones that made the wrestling world stop completely. Names that had been on television the week before. Names that had competed during WrestleMania weekend. Names that were right in the middle of ongoing storylines that will now never be resolved. Post-WrestleMania releases have become something of a dark tradition in WWE. It happens almost every single year, and 2026 was no different in that regard. But the scale this time around felt different. The silence felt different. There were no emotional on-screen goodbyes, no extended send-off storylines, no acknowledgement from the company whatsoever. The news came through reporters and tweets and Twitch streams. One moment these performers were part of the WWE machine, featured on weekly television, part of active storylines, and the next they had been quietly moved to the alumni section of WWE.com. Just like that. Done. Now let us talk about who was actually on that list, because the specific names are what make this story sting so deeply. Aleister Black, Zelina Vega, Kairi Sane, the Motor City Machine Guns, Santos Escobar, Apollo Crews, Alba Fire, Zoe Stark, Andre Chase, and in what is perhaps the most emotionally devastating piece of this entire story, the complete and total dissolution of the Wyatt Six, meaning Bo Dallas, Nikki Cross, Joe Gacy, Dexter Lumis, and Eric Rowan were all released on the same day. On top of all of that, NXT and developmental talents, including Dante Chen, Luca Crucifino, Malik Blade, and others, were also handed their walking papers. Several of these performers had been on screen during WrestleMania week itself. Kairi Sane competed in a tag team match on the episode of Raw that aired on April 20th, just 4 days before her release. Aleister Black competed in the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal on April 17th. The Wyatt Six competed in an 8-man street fight against the Meta 4 on the April 17th episode of SmackDown, which turned out to be their final match together exactly 1 week before the group was disbanded entirely. Think about what that must feel like. You are a professional wrestler. You just worked WrestleMania week, one of the most celebrated periods on the entire wrestling calendar. You are in the middle of a storyline. You have been on television. And then on a Friday, your phone rings, and that is it. It is over. When the news broke, the wrestling internet immediately went into speculation mode. Fans began pointing fingers at TKO Group Holdings and its executives, specifically Ari Emanuel and WWE President Nick Khan. That reaction made a certain amount of sense. TKO is the parent company. They own both WWE and UFC. When a publicly traded entertainment conglomerate starts cutting headcount, the instinct is to blame the corporate suits who look at names on a spreadsheet rather than human beings who perform in front of millions of fans every single week. And there was at least some early evidence to support that theory. A report from Corey Hayes over at Bodyslam.net revealed that talent were actually informed by TKO that they were being let go, not by Triple H and not by talent relations directly, but by TKO itself, which immediately set off a wave of alarm bells throughout the industry. If TKO is making the calls directly to the talent, that raises a very uncomfortable question about who is actually running this company and whether Triple H is truly the decision maker or simply a very prominent face for decisions being made above him. But then Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer stepped in with a clarification that completely reframed the entire conversation. According to Meltzer, nobody above Triple H is sitting in a boardroom dictating which specific names get cut. Ari Emanuel is not personally calling for Zelina Vega or Kairi Sane to be released. The picture that emerged from Meltzer's reporting was not of a puppet being controlled by corporate strings, but of a man who is himself holding the scissors. By and large, according to Meltzer, the decision-maker for good or for bad is Paul Levesque. He drew a direct comparison to the Vince McMahon era, where fans and industry insiders would routinely point the finger at whoever happened to hold the talent relations title at the time, whether that was Jim Ross or Johnny Ace or J.J. Dillon. But the reality was always the same. The final decision was Vince's. And now in 2026, that same dynamic is playing out with a different name at the very top of that hierarchy. Triple H consults people. Nick Khan almost certainly has input on the financial side of things. Fightful Select reported that it was Triple H, Khan, and WWE Talent Relations who were the primary decision-makers when it came to determining the cuts. But the final responsibility, the final act of pointing at a name on a roster sheet and saying this one goes, that belongs to Paul Levesque. Meltzer also noted the financial element that underpins all of this. He suggested that there is likely an unofficial salary cap in place and that Triple H, functioning essentially as a general manager with a budget ceiling, has to keep the total payroll number below whatever threshold TKO has set. So the picture that emerges is this. TKO sets the overall financial envelope. Nick Khan manages the business side of what that envelope looks like. And then Triple H. Like a general manager navigating a salary cap in professional sports, has to make the agonizing decisions about which performers fit within that budget and which ones do not. That is the reality of running a professional wrestling company underneath a publicly traded entertainment conglomerate in 2026. There is a budget. There is always a budget. And when there is a budget, there are always casualties. WWE has framed these releases as part of a broader strategic shift, one that prioritizes long-term creative storytelling, financial efficiency, and making room for new talent coming in through main roster call-ups and fresh performance center signings. But that framing is cold comfort to the people who just lost their livelihoods, especially when some of them had reportedly been promised something more, especially when some of them had recently agreed to brand new deals, and especially when some of them had been carrying the weight of a dead man's legacy on their shoulders every single week. That last point brings us to the storyline that hurt the most when it all came crashing down. The complete dissolution of the Wyatt Six faction, a group that existed entirely to honor the legacy of the late Bray Wyatt, sending all 5 of its members home in a single day, is the headline that cut deepest. To truly understand why that matters so much, you have to go back to August 24th of 2023, when Bray Wyatt passed away from a heart attack at the age of 36. The condition was pre-existing and had been severely exacerbated by a COVID-19 infection. Wyndham Rotunda was one of the most uniquely creative minds that professional wrestling has ever produced. The Wyatt family, The Fiend, the Firefly Funhouse, his character work drawing comparisons to Charles Manson and figures from classic psychological horror films. Bray Wyatt was singular. There was nobody like him before, and there has been nobody like him since his passing. Before Wyatt died, there had already been online speculation that he and his Uncle Howdy character were building toward a new version of the Wyatt family, to be called the Wyatt Six, with real-life performers embodying the puppet characters from the Firefly Funhouse segments. That plan never came to be during his lifetime. But after he passed, his real-life brother Bo Dallas chose to pick it up and carry it forward. Each member of the group was assigned one of Bray's beloved puppet characters. Nikki Cross portrayed Abby the Witch. Eric Rowan portrayed Rambling Rabbit, Dexter Lumis portrayed Mercy the Buzzard, and Joe Gacy portrayed Huskus the Pig Boy. In early 2024, WWE launched an elaborate alternate reality game that fans nicknamed Nightbird, airing mysterious vignettes at live events and during commercial breaks, teasing the eventual return of Uncle Howdy. QR codes led fans to websites filled with riddles and cryptic imagery. The marketing was intricate, emotionally resonant, and deeply respectful of everything Bray had built during his career. On June 17 of 2024, the Wyatt Six made their debut at the end of an episode of Raw, and it was jaw-dropping. The presentation was dark and layered and genuinely thrilling. Backstage shots of masked figures. Wrestlers and backstage personnel laid out unconscious as Uncle Howdy walked through a thick fog and finally reached down to grab Bray's lantern before declaring that they were here. It was a perfect introduction. Social media exploded with excitement and emotion. And according to many observers, that debut was also the creative high point of the entire faction's existence, because once the lights came up and the masks came off and the bells started ringing, the creative energy began to dissipate. The Wyatt Six were transferred to SmackDown in January of 2025, but due to an injury sustained by Uncle Howdy, they did not actually appear on television until May. When they returned, Lumis and Gacy won the WWE Tag Team Championships on the July 11th episode of SmackDown, which seemed to signal genuine momentum. But then things began to slide sideways. By late November, the group was locked into a seemingly endless feud with Solo Sikoa and the metaphor that dragged on for months, with diminishing returns each and every week. That storyline concluded with a loss in an 8-man tag team street fight on the episode of SmackDown that aired right before WrestleMania 42. And exactly 1 week after that, the entire faction was gone. PW Insider's Mike Johnson put it as bluntly as anyone could. He noted that it was genuinely staggering that the Wyatt Six had gone from having their own featured attraction at Universal's Halloween Horror Nights to being released from the company 6 months later. In the aftermath of the releases, the tributes came pouring in. Nikki Cross addressed her departure with an emotional tribute to the Wyatt Six, to Bray Wyatt, and to Brody Lee. After more than a decade with the company, Dexter Lumis wrote about how the group had truly felt Bray's presence every single time they made their entrance. Joe Gacy shared perhaps the most moving reflection of all, describing an encounter with a moth, the iconic symbol long associated with Bray Wyatt, that occurred just before the faction's debut. He wrote that he was standing alone backstage, looked around, saw that no one was near him, and in that moment felt Wyndham's presence with him. The fans felt it too. Social media erupted with a mixture of genuine grief and pure anger. One fan wrote that their heart truly broke for the Wyatt Six and called it completely cruel to use them as a way to profit off of Bray Wyatt's death. Others called out what they saw as obvious creative mismanagement, and honestly, they had a point. The biggest criticism that can be leveled at how the Wyatt Six were handled is that they never evolved. For 18 months, it was essentially the same entrance, the same presentation, the same dynamic, with no compelling reason for the group to exist beyond maintaining Bray's memory. Eric Rowan, Joe Gacy, and Dexter Lumis in particular rarely spoke and never developed into fully fleshed-out individuals with their own identities separate from the group. They were a tribute act, and eventually even tribute acts have to end. Beyond the Wyatt Six, there were individual releases that left people genuinely stunned, not just because of who was released, but because of the specific timing and context surrounding each departure. Aleister Black and Zelina Vega were not only both released on the same day, but are also a married couple in real life, which adds an entirely different layer to an already painful situation. Black had been a regular and visible presence on SmackDown, firmly entrenched in the upper mid-card. He had won his last 3 matches of the year, defeating Sami Zayn in a non-title match against the then United States champion, then beating WrestleMania headliner Randy Orton, and then Matt Cardona. This was not a man who had been buried or forgotten or consistently losing his matches to signal a release was coming. He was winning. He had returned to WWE approximately 1 year earlier for his second stint with the company after a solid run in AEW, where he had worked as Malachi Black. His original WWE tenure had ended in June of 2021. His subsequent run in AEW lasted until February of 2025, and he made his return to WWE following WrestleMania 41. Zelina Vega had been part of the company on her second run since 2017, having originally signed back in 2014. She had held the Queen of the Ring crown, won the Women's United States Championship, and spent years serving the company as both an in-ring competitor and a manager. She confirmed the news of her release through a Twitch stream. Kairi Sane's release may be the single most baffling decision on the entire list. She was not a forgotten performer. She was not sitting at home with a nagging injury keeping her off television. She was not someone who had been off-screen for months with no storyline direction. She was a former NXT Women's Champion, a three-time Women's Tag Team Champion, a Mae Young Classic winner. She had returned to WWE at Crown Jewel in 2023 following a stint in Stardom and New Japan Pro Wrestling, where she had become the inaugural IWGP Women's Champion. Back in WWE, she reunited with Asuka as the Kabuki Warriors and captured the Women's Tag Team Championship for a third time. At the time of her release, she was in the middle of an active and ongoing storyline with Asuka and Io Sky, a program that never even made the WrestleMania 42 card despite all three women being relevant names in the division. Her final match was on April 20th, a tag team match on Raw alongside Asuka against Rhea Ripley and Io Sky. 4 days later, she was released. Io Sky posted a deeply heartfelt tribute to her best friend across social media. The Motor City Machine Guns, the legendary pairing of Alex Shelley and Chris Sabin, were also let go despite having made an immediate impact when they arrived and having captured tag team gold early into their run with the company. Shelley and Sabin had signed with WWE in September of 2024 and had debuted on the October 18th episode of SmackDown.